I'm about to have a chat with Jack Haig, who is one of the few pro bike riders out of Australia in the last 30 years who I haven't really done an interview with, so I'm quite looking forward to this one. He's in Andorra, I'm in Sydney, just to be clear. He doesn't really need any introduction. He came third in the Vuelta España last year in 2021. He races for the Bahrain Victorious team, and we can expect big things of him because he's just a super duper talent. Let's find out more. Here he is. He's just turned up on my screen, so I'm just going to invite him in here. 1, 2, 3. Hello, Jack.
Hey, mate. How's it going?
Very well. Very, very well. Hopefully our lips will be in sync and we can get to know a little bit more about you. But I said just when we arranged this interview that I felt like I owed you an apology because I've spoken with a lot of pro bike riders, but you and I have never, ever really had a decent discussion.
No, that's right. And I'm looking forward to having a good discussion here and getting to know you a little bit better and sharing some information with everyone.
Okay. So we're just talking about the Tour de France guide, and I hope to include this interview as part of that. But my assumption is that you'll be part of Bahrain Victorious's Tour de France lineup in 2022. Am I correct?
Yeah. So basically, yesterday, Monday, was the first day in the preparation build now towards the Tour de France. So my last race was Liège. And then I had a more or less like a rest week, an easy week last week. And then now starts sort of the serious build up with everything focused for the Tour de France.
Okay. And I mean, it's been a team that's been a steady progression, but in 2022, it's been hitting a lot of goals. And I speak particularly about people like Moritz and Dylan Tones, who seems to be kicking goals. But you have had quite a lead into the year, or?
To be honest, I've been I haven't had the luckiest year. I had COVID in January, so that kind of changed my early season race program, and then just basically this whole season, the first half of the season, I feel like I've been playing a bit of catch up. So like I had a really good build up until January when I had COVID, and then I actually got quite sick with COVID. So I ended up taking a full week off the bike and was not feeling super good. And after that, I sort of got back in a bit of a rhythm, did some really good training, and then started feeling relatively good. My first race was Ruta del Sol, or Vuelta Andalusia, where my teammate Wout Poels won, and I had a relatively good performance there, and I sort of felt like I was back on track more or less. I went off to Paris-Nice, and that was sort of one of the first goals of the season, and I was still a little bit unsure of how I was going to go there just after COVID, and I managed to ride okay. I was really hoping for a slightly better result. I think I finished 6th overall. But on the final weekend, I got actually quite sick. And the last stage into Nice, I wasn't feeling that good and I had a bit of a rough day. And I think you saw quite a lot of pros this year have been getting really sick. And especially in Paris-Nice, I think we only had 55 odd finishes out of 120, 130 guys because everyone was sort of coming down with some kind of illness. So I finished Paris-Nice feeling a little bit under the weather, and my next race is meant to be Vuelta Catalunya. And I kind of came home. There's 1 week in between the two races, and I thought I managed to recover a little bit. And I really wanted to race Vuelta Catalunya because it's really close to my home, and I just enjoy racing near my home. And I went there, and after the first stage, I hadn't recovered properly, and that night I had a really bad fever and basically didn't sleep, and went home the next day, and that kind of spiraled into sort of a 4 or 5 week illness almost, where I had again another full week off the bike. I had to take some antibiotics. I had a bunch of bronchitis kind of symptoms, and then just been feeling pretty under the weather until maybe the second week of the Ardennes. So it's not been the start to the year that I really hoped for, but we're getting there now.
Okay, so that explains why we've seen a lot of your teammates, but not a great deal of you. But
exactly.
All going. What do you put all of this illness down to? Ben O'Connor had the theory that it was just everyone was super duper cautious because of COVID, and then when the flu season hit, then everyone came under the weather. If you got a theory, I'm not asking for your
No,
medical diagnosis, but
well, I think COVID was pretty unavoidable in sort of the winter months here in Europe. Everyone was sort of getting it, and then it was sort of just a matter of time. And then the second illness that I got, for whatever reason, again, like I said, it just went around the peloton like crazy, and it seemed pretty hard to avoid it. And I also have a son who's going to kindergarten, and he's just over 1 year old, so that never helps. So it could be a numerous things, but I think a couple of those things probably lead to it.
and you're based in Andorra, is that right?
Yeah, correct.
In Lavelle, not like down in the
No, no. So I live just a little bit higher up from Andorra La Vella, which is the capital city, in a small town called La Massana. So
Mhm.
it's kind of at an elevation of maybe like 1,200, 1,300 meters. And it's a bit more of a quiet residential town than, say, the center of Andorra. And yeah, I've lived in Andorra now for just over 6 and a bit years.
Mhm.
And yeah, I enjoyed it. It's home for me now. I have my entire life here. I pretty much I haven't gone back to Australia since the end of 2015, start of 2016, and I always spend, yeah, my entire year in Andorra basically. And my home's here. I have a own a house. We have a family here. Everything.
Okay. Is your wife Andorra
She's
Spanish,
Spanish.
Australian?
She's
Okay.
Spanish. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that makes it a little bit easier. And like we do Christmas and these kind of events, and we still have like family time. So it's not like we're both Australian or both expats living here.
Hmm. And how does that set life up for post cycling? I mean, we can talk about lots of different things, but do you imagine that you'll be Euro forever now?
To be honest, I'm not sure. And my wife's never actually been to Australia. So I'm not sure we can decide where we'll end up living until we probably make a trip to Australia. But for myself, I'm actually not that phased about where we end up, whether it's back in Australia or we stay in Europe, because yeah, I made Europe home now, and I've kind of almost semi forgotten what Australia is like to an extent. So for me, it doesn't change too much whether we decide to be here or in Australia. And I guess it would come down to probably job opportunities post cycling.
Okay. Do you imagine that? I mean, I don't know why I'm talking about post career when you're in the middle of
Yeah.
the thickest of your career, but do you imagine you'll stay in cycling just out of curiosity?
Um, it's interesting because you kind of see people that retire, and it's definitely the easiest pathway into a post like cycling career is to move into cycling, because that's what we know best. And generally,
Hmm.
if you move into, say, like a coaching, mentor, director kind of role, you keep a very similar routine to what you've had when you were a pro, where you come home and then you go away for racing for a long period of time and you come home, and it's not, say, like a 9 to 5 job where you're working Monday to Friday. So it really depends on the opportunities that come up. I'm definitely not against staying in cycling, but then I also very much enjoy learning new things and educating myself. So I'd be open to different opportunities. But yeah, I'm definitely not against working and staying in cycling.
Okay. Let's talk about bike racing.
All right.
From now through till the 1st of July, when you go to Copenhagen for the Grand Depart and a time trial around the streets of the capital,
Hmm.
what's on the program? Is it the sort of traditional Frenchy build up through Dauphiné and the like, or how does it work for
Yeah.
you?
So the next thing I do is tomorrow I will stay in Andorra, but I'll actually move from my home in La Massana to an apartment at around 2,000 meters elevation. And that kind of starts the preparation period of altitude training, which is becoming more and more prominent and sort of important in Grand Tour build-ups now. So I'll do 1 week in Andorra, and then I fly to Tenerife, and we go to Teide. There's a hotel up there that I'm sure many cycling people know and professionals have been using for a very long time. And we stay there for 2 weeks, and I really enjoy it there. It's a really quiet, tranquil place. There's nothing else at the top of the mountain there other than this really small hotel, and the weather's really good, and it's really good to get in some really hard training to prepare for Dauphiné, which will be my first race.
Mhm.
And then after Dauphiné, we have a little bit longer this year compared to last year because there's no Olympics. So I think now we almost have 3 weeks, like 3.5 weeks, I think, in between Dauphiné and the Tour. So I have
That's
more,
sort of traditionally the span, yeah.
yeah. Whereas last year it was 1 week shorter because the Tour was 1 week earlier because of Olympics. So I'll come back to Andorra and do another 2 week block of altitude in Andorra, and then head off to Copenhagen.
Okay. Given that we're talking about the altitude and going to Teed, how do you say the place?
Ah, yeah. I would pronounce it
Yeah.
Teide, Teide,
Teede.
and
Okay.
the island would be called Tenerife, but in also Spanish they sort of say Tenerife, but it's all the same.
Okay. Okay. I'll take your guidance on Spanish.
Yeah.
Mine is non-existent. But while we're at altitude, so to speak,
Hmm.
just talk to me about what you physically feel. I've talked to Egan Bernal and other people about the effects
Yeah.
of altitude. Have you got a tent at your place there at 1,200 meters, or
No.
and just
Uh
can you just explain what your
yeah.
sensations are for the people who haven't done this sort of thing, and also what you're trying to achieve?
Yep. Uh I maybe have a very simplistic view on cycling training and preparation to racing, and I'm not sure the altitude has as much of an effect as maybe people think it does. And I think it's more having that camp environment where you go somewhere, it's generally at the top of a mountain. So you have to do a lot more elevation of climbing to get to and from the hotel. You're there, the only purpose you're there for is to train. And whether
Mhm.
that was at altitude or not at altitude, I think you would get very similar benefits just because it's such a focused period of work where you have everything there that you need to perform in training and then come back and recover. Um, and maybe because I spend majority of my time living at home, which is at moderate to low altitude, I don't notice too much of the effects of, say, sleeping at night, which I know quite a few people notice that when they go to altitude that they can struggle to sleep the first 3, 4 nights. Um, so yeah, I the benefit or the purpose for going to altitude is mainly just to have an environment that is extremely focused towards preparing for racing.
Okay. Okay. And I mean, I guess the benefit is I don't imagine that there's much traffic on Tenerife, only bicycle traffic, and there'd be a fair dose of that based on the trends of the last, let's say, 10 years.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of professional cyclists basically staying at this hotel. In certain periods of the year, the hotel is 90% professional cyclists. And that can be a good and a bad thing. It's quite nice to feel that you're in a very professional environment and everyone's there for the same purpose of preparing for racing and trying to get the most out of themselves. But it can also feel like a bit of a bubble and like you're at a bit of a race. So, and then also with the growth of recreational cycling, there's so many recreational cyclists also come to Tenerife and Andorra every single year. I'm seeing more and more. So there's a lot of cycling traffic, that's for sure.
Okay. Does not mean you're going out training in black or out of your team kit or trying to
No,
remain incognito, or do
no.
you actually like the visitors, for example?
Yeah, of course. Like it's always nice to interact with the people because at the end of the day, it's what makes our sport. Like without the fans and the spectators and people like yourself, our sport doesn't exist as a profession. So I always try to make
Mm.
time to say hello to people if they want to stop and have a photo or anything like this.
Okay. Just for the record, you're occasionally going freeze frame, but that's okay. People understand technology. I just thought I'd explain that just so that
Sorry.
it's out there.
Yeah.
But okay, and but you're a pro bike rider, so you know your blood levels and the like. Does the altitude impact you dramatically, or you sort of
Um, Not dramatically. Maybe 1 or 2 points more than I would have at home. I think, to be honest, one of the things that affects the blood values the most is how fresh you are or how well you've looked after your body. So I also find that if I've done a period of good training, that I've really understood my body, had enough recovery and everything, even if it's at sea level, I'll find a bump in my red blood cells. So, yeah, there's a little bit from
Mhm.
altitude, but I think a lot of it also comes down to making sure that you listen to your body and you recover enough. Because if you don't give your body enough time to recover, it won't produce those extra red blood cells because it will prioritize other things instead of that.
Okay. And the illnesses from the earlier in the year, do you feel like that's really well and truly behind you and you're coming up to peak form, or do you think that your
Yeah,
body's still working on those hindrances?
no, the weather's slowly starting to change now, in Europe and in Andorra. It's actually quite cold this week, but last week it was quite warm and sort of mid-20s, and that definitely helps with the feeling and the body to recover from the illnesses. And I've now had a relatively easy week, so I'm feeling pretty good.
Okay. I mean, a lot of I assume your files are on Strava, like most bike
Yep.
riders in the world. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is a redundant question for people who follow you, but I did ask Richie Port, who's another GC bike rider from Australia, years ago, what kind of training he was doing around this time, and he was
Mhm.
talking about over 25,000. I mean, I can't remember, 25,000 meters climbing in a week or something like
Yeah.
that. Have you got some numbers that might make people go, oh?
Um, I think if you look at some of the annual data, I'm maybe amongst some of the most vertical meters done on the pro peloton, but that also comes down to the fact that in Andorra there's almost zero flat roads, so every single day is kind of 3,000, 4,000 meters elevation.
Okay.
And then generally in sort of this preparation period, I'd say an average would be 25, 26 hours per week of training on the bike. And then, yeah, anything between that sort of 17, 18 to 22, 23,000 vertical meters per week.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just sort of basically about trying to string together those consistent days of getting time outside and time climbing.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. When you're struggling to get time outside, are you jumping on indoor trainer? I mean, there's a huge revolution going on. Well, it's
Yep.
been going on for years, but like,
Yeah.
do you get much out of the smart trainer, or would you prefer to be on the road, or just can you give me a little overview of how you approach that?
I
Are
would
there
definitely
days where
prefer.
it's beautiful outside and you'll be on the home
No.
trainer? Okay.
No, if it's nice weather outside, I'll definitely be outside. But for example, yesterday was raining majority of the day in Andorra, and then I did an hour and a half ride inside on Zwift on my time trial bike. So generally, especially in the winter, I use Zwift quite a lot, and more or less my time trial bike is set up not permanently, but 95% of the time on the indoor trainer, and I'll use the time that I train inside to ride in my time trial position. And occasionally I will use the indoor trainer if the weather is nice outside, just to do maybe an hour, hour and a half on the time trial bike and really do some actual intervals. But a majority of the time it's used to just do a recovery day or just spending a little bit of time in there if the weather's bad.
Okay. Okay. We know, I mean, people know the very generic intro to Jack Haig. You were a mountain biker, you came to road cycling. The mountain biking seems like half a lifetime ago, which it
Yeah.
essentially is. Uh, just talk to me about your body shape since you've made that transition. Are you more or less the same,
I
or are you
yeah.
can you can you feel a dramatic change in upper body
To
shrinking or
be
something like that?
To be honest, I'm actually heavier now than when I was racing on the mountain bike. But I think that also just comes with when I was racing on the mountain bike, I was 17 to 21.
Mhm.
And now I've matured a bit more, and I maybe spend too much time in the gym. I really enjoy going to the gym. And I think, I don't know if I would be a better cyclist if I didn't go to the gym, but I think I would probably weigh less. So
Okay.
there's obviously pros and cons to going to the gym, and you get a benefit from that. But the consequence is that you normally end up weighing a little bit more. And I personally enjoy being at the gym. It's a social thing for me as well. I have some friends that are at the gym at the same time as me. It's not part of the cycling community, and I also just like the way that it makes me feel. I feel a stronger all-round person in life, as well as I just feel a bit stronger on the bike.
Okay. But I imagine, just based on my knowledge of road cycling, you're just doing low weights, high reps, core strength, that kind of thing. You're not sitting there doing
Mm,
big leg squats, are you? You're not a track rider.
no, I actually do a lot of heavy weight. So
Okay. Okay.
especially in the winter when it's a bit harder during the season because we spend so much time traveling and it's very hard to consistently do it. But especially in the winter months, I'll do as almost sort of between 4 to 8 reps of say 80% of my 1 rep max. So it's for a back squat, it might be between 70 to 90 kilos, depending on, it doesn't sound like a lot. And like you said, I'm not a track cyclist, but for a road climbing cyclist, I think it's relatively decent.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. And with that taper off now, you're basically out of
Yeah.
the gym and on the bike. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
No, so I still go to the gym now, but it's just not as heavy weights because it's very hard to do it consistently now. So I also
Hmm.
find that if you're not doing it consistently, that's when you kind of get the DOMS, or delayed onset muscle soreness,
Uh-huh.
and then that takes away from the training during this period when we're traveling a lot. So I still try to go to the gym 2 to 3 times per week, and then it's much more of, like what you said, sort of core stability stuff and making sure that just the body is, it's kind of more maintenance and body maintenance to make sure everything's working well, doing some mobility stuff, doing enough strength stuff to keep the body all in line. Because I think if you spend, say, 25 hours a week just riding your bike, your body becomes very good at being in that cycling position. But if you
Hmm.
have any small changes, like even if it's something as silly as you go for a walk with your dog and you just roll your ankle a little bit, if you've been doing some stability stuff in the gym, that might be nothing. But if all you've done is ride your bike and you're in that, you've got no strength or stability there in your ankle or your knees or this, you might have an injury that then takes you off the bike for 2, 3 weeks.
Okay, that's a great explanation. I mean, this is well away from the Tour de France, but it's good insights. And it's been a while. I used to do interviews regularly, and it's now been quite a long time since I've talked to anyone about pro cycling. But I enjoy it. It's been a big part of my life, and a lot of what you said sort of resonates with me. I've been on the bike a lot, and it doesn't take much to pinch a nerve in my back or something.
Yeah.
So you become hyper aware of your body. Is there one, apart from the illnesses, is there some part of you which is frail? Like, you, what did you break when you crashed at the Tour last year?
My left collarbone here.
Okay,
Yeah.
have you done that a few times?
No, it's actually I've been very lucky so
Okay,
far, touch wood.
touch wood.
Uh that that was the first major injury that I've actually sustained on a bike. So I've
Ah,
never had any other kind of, I had a bit of a knee niggle in 2019, but the collarbone was the first proper injury that I have had.
oh, Ripper. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. So, I mean, we've gone 25 minutes already, just so you shut me up, otherwise I'll just keep you forever. But just while we're sort of going on obtuse topics,
Hmm.
after the accident at the Tour, and then you went home, stayed bloody early. Which one was it that you left?
Stage 3.
Yeah.
So really early.
So were you compelled to have a look at the race, or did you deliberately stay away from it and not watch television, or how did you
Um,
play that month?
I still watched a little bit for sure because it's hard not to follow it. Like my entire life is cycling, more or less. It's my profession. It's what I do. So as soon as you open your phone or as soon as you look at anything on your phone, it's cycling related. And
Yeah.
I was also not doing a whole lot because I had a broken collarbone. So I would watch the tour every now and then, but I wouldn't prioritize it. Like if we were out at having lunch or I was out going for a walk with a dog or something, I wouldn't look at my phone to check the results. Or like that afternoon,
Okay.
I might get home like, I wonder what happened in the tour. But I definitely
Mm.
wasn't following it very closely. I did when the tour came to Andorra. I actually went down to see my team, and I had lunch with them and everything because they had the rest day here. So I still stayed a little bit involved, but I definitely
Okay.
didn't watch it as a fan.
And when you left, were you all like, "Oh, God, I put my," or did you just sort of be like, how were
No,
you? Were you?
I was pretty devastated when I left, to be honest, because it was my first opportunity I had to be the leader of a team. I'd had a really, really good build up to the Tour de France. I basically had zero interruptions the whole way there. I'd done quite well in Criterium Dauphiné just before it, and then
Mhm.
I finished top five stage one, and then I think I was top 10 stage two, and I was feeling really good. And I sacrificed a lot to sort of get myself there in that position. And when I crashed, I was actually pretty devastated, not only for myself, but for the team around me, because everyone around me had also sacrificed a lot to get there, as well as
Mhm.
I remember I called my wife when I was in hospital and I was crying on the phone to her saying, like, sorry, because she'd sacrificed a lot to help me get to where I was. And then to be in hospital and coming home, I was definitely not sort of what I wanted.
No, that makes sense. Yeah. I mean, I'm sorry to sort of be flippant about that question.
No.
And then you're back up to go to the Vuelta, and I watched a fair bit of the Vuelta. We were in lockdown in Sydney, so every day I was
Of
on the home
course.
trainer just watching the highlights, but or watching the stage. So
Hmm.
I got to see a lot of how that one played out, and it was, to be honest, it was more or less what you just alluded to. Just you get a real sense of how do you put it, a compliment from your teammates when you see really credible riders who have their own, hopes and ambitions, and they're just going hell for leather, just working their asses off for you. Um, that's obviously a motivating factor. But was there ever a time when you were like, "Oh, guys, I'm just not here today. I just don't. I don't want to do this," or when the pressure's on and you know that the podium was within reach, you get there.
Uh, no.
How do you
When
manage that? It's a strange. It's not a question. I guess it's just
Yeah,
a line of discussion.
I guess I went into Vuelta with a very different mindset to what I went into the Tour de France, because I went into the Tour de France and there was much more pressure on me to perform well, and I was going there as the GC leader. Whereas I went into La Vuelta, I'd only managed to ride outside for 3 weeks before going there, and I had no idea of what my condition was like, and I only got selected like a week before we went there because the team was like, I don't know if you'll be in good shape. Like I still couldn't really get out of the saddle properly and put proper weight on my shoulder. And Mikel was going there as the leader. So basically my
Uh-huh.
role going into the Welter was just to be a support rider and get those race days in my legs for this year. So when it kind of all changed and started to evolve that I was moving into the GC leadership, I guess it was a bit easier to handle that pressure because I'd sort of visualized all of it and been through that process going to the Tour de France. So when I was there, I felt quite comfortable, to be honest, and I also didn't have anywhere near as much pressure on me. Where achieving up to a certain point, even if it was that I'd been top five and then in the last week I completely bombed out, no one would have said, the shit result, because I just come from having such a bad accident. So it was a much easier thing to handle.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, and I mean the Vuelta is not the Tour de France as well, so you've obviously it's still a huge deal to come on the podium. I understand that it's a 3-week race. There's not many of them, but was it a little bit more subdued with the
Oh,
hype? You
100%.
saw that.
Oh,
Okay.
100%. The Tour de France is the
Yeah.
biggest race that we do during the year, and
Hmm.
it has the most media around it, has the most hype, and it's the thing that everyone knows. When you explain to someone that doesn't know anything about cycling that you're a professional cyclist, the first question is, have you been to the Tour? No one says, oh,
Hmm.
have you been to Welter? Half the time they don't even know what it is.
But I finished on the podium, so ask me about
Exactly.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You raised Mick Orlando. He's going to the Giro, I think, isn't he?
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
He won't be at the Tour.
It depends how the Giro pans out. So, depends how he goes during the Giro and then how he recovers afterwards. He's definitely on the list of possibility of possible riders to go to the Tour de France, but obviously anything can happen in the Giro. like you saw last year, he had a really unfortunate crash during the Giro and also injured himself quite badly. So yeah, he's on the list, but whether it pans out that way or not is difficult to say.
He's an enigma. Like, wow, like a lot of people have their social media views on Mikel Landa, but they don't hang out with him in a team hotel a lot. Can you offer a sentence or two about what he's like to ride with?
To As a person, I really, really like Mikel. To sit down and have a conversation with and everything like this is really, really nice person. Um, to ride with is obviously an incredible talent, and I think you've seen that throughout his career. I don't know how many times, but he's been a ridiculous amount of times top 5 in Grand Tours and always been super close to making that podium, and he's made it once, I think, in Giro.
Mm-hmm.
And he always just seems to have a little bit of bad luck somewhere, or something just doesn't quite go his way in a race. But he's definitely a mega talent.
Okay. Sometimes I remember when he was at the front of the SkyTrain and he looked genuinely bored.
he he maybe has interesting facial expressions when he's racing, but he's a really nice person to have a conversation with and have a coffee with, and he likes talking
Mhm.
about cars. He has a really big collection of antique bikes. Yeah, and he's a pretty quiet person. He lives in a small village in the Basque Country, and yeah.
Okay. Can we get a little? I don't expect you to nominate the other 7, but if we're talking about the Tour de France, you must know roughly the
Yeah,
composition. Could
so
you?
I probably can't name everyone, but there's some probably obvious choices like Matej Mohoric will be going. Um,
Mhm.
and then, yeah, a lot of the team depends on the Giro. So you also have riders, for example, like Michelanda, Pello Bilbao, and then obviously Dylan Toons has had a really good spring this
Mhm.
year, and he's definitely a possibility. We'll also be taking quite a few bigger guys because of the first week of the Tour de France is quite important to have those stronger, bigger guys there to support on the flat. So yeah, there'll be a good composition, and we have a really big depth inside the team. So there's maybe a long list of 12 riders that could go to the Tour de France.
Mhm.
Um, and we have really experienced riders, for example, like Luis Leon Sanchez, who's been in the professional peloton, I think, for 17 years or something ridiculous, or 15 years. So he obviously offers up a lot of strength as well as experience.
Okay. It'd be interesting to see if he comes back. It feels like he's been here for 25 years, but
Yeah.
but he just keeps on giving as well, and he's sort of a timeless character.
Mhm.
Just a quick word on Morich, if we could. Do you know how to say his name? A lot of people are saying Mohoric, but I've been told it was more rich. How does he say his name? Have you ever heard that?
No idea, to tell you the truth. I just call him Mate.
Okay, okay, mate.
Mate.
Um,
Yeah.
Yeah, but he's I mean he's come into his own, like, but I remember when he was beating Caleb Ewan in the worlds as a junior, he was always going to be a super talent, but then he sort of, I think he got bored with it for a little while until he started winning.
I think maybe one of the regrets he has, if you ask him, is turning professional as early as he did. So he didn't do any
Okay.
years under 23. He went straight from juniors to professionals. And in a time when that wasn't so common, it's becoming much more common now that guys are turning professional very young. But I think when he turned professional into Liquigas, which is quite an old school team. I think he suffered a lot those first couple of years that he was pro. I remember racing him in Tour Down Under. I was
Hmm.
there in the UniSA team, and he was there his first race as a pro after winning world championships as a junior. And I remember he suffered the entire race. And it was just
Ah,
because after speaking to him now as teammates, he said that winter was ridiculous. He was made to do crazy amounts of training and all this kind of stuff, and he just arrived to Uganda completely tired and couldn't perform properly. So I think it's taken him a few years to figure out himself and how to train and ride and be a professional. He's an incredibly intelligent person, and he maybe overthought things when he was younger, and now he's managed to have a better view on everything.
you raised it, so I'm going to ask the question: Is it You strike me as an intelligent bloke, so
Thank you.
is it beneficial to be a little bit stupid to be a pro bike rider, or is it a curse to have intelligence? I'm going to see how I word that question if I'm going to
No,
publish one or not.
I know, 100% what you're trying to say, and uh, I've often wondered whether it's would be a blessing to maybe be less intelligent and not think about things as much,
Mhm.
and maybe you wouldn't get as caught up in your own thoughts. But on the other hand, I very much enjoy the learning aspect and the thinking and the planning and the education that happens when you have the ability to think about things a little bit more. But I've definitely seen many very, very, very good professionals that maybe aren't very intelligent. So, yeah, there's two sides to it. It's a tricky question to answer, and
Yeah,
sometimes,
you've
yeah,
done well.
sometimes I have said maybe it would be better if I didn't overthink things so much, or I didn't read so much, or I didn't look into things so much. But then on the other hand, maybe it's those things that have led me to where I am now.
Very diplomatic. I think you handled that well, Jack. You'd think we'd known each other for years. But look, I'm really mindful of the time. That's 40 minutes now, closing in on. So as you
Yeah,
can see, I could go on forevermore. But I learned a lot. I really enjoyed having a chat today. So I'll
no,
respect
thank
your
you.
time, and I wish you all the best for the next couple of months. There's going to be a hell of a lot on, and I hope you can just put that all aside and just focus on what you need to do. I'm glad I got you to talk about the Tour de France in May, which it must be annoying,
Yeah,
but these things happen.
no,
I just would like you to know that when you are in Copenhagen, even though I'm going to miss the third tour in a row after 24 being there, and I'm going to be devastated by that, I will be watching, I'll be cheering, and I'm sure a lot of Aussies will be. And I hope it goes a lot further than stage 3 and that you
thank
do
you.
everything that you want.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed the conversation.